Welcome, everybody. Hope everyone's faring okay today. Do we have any public comments lined up at all?
We did have one person sign up, but I don't see them here. But if any attendees would like to provide a comment, you can raise your hand, your Zoom hand right now. But I do not see any, so I think we're good to go on to Jen's report.
Okay, great. Welcome, Jen, for the City Forester report.
You're muted.
Thank you, yes. Good morning, commissioners and attendees. It's lovely to see you all. Thank you for being here, given the really challenging conditions we have across the city. And that said, rightly, I will start off with a little bit of an update on this storm event. As of about 10 minutes ago, we have around 405 confirmed tree emergency assistance requests in the city. These are on streets and city property. Many of those involve blocked roads and downed power lines. In those cases, that means we await the electric utility to shut off those lines. They're very dangerous, as I hope you all know, to be around. And that needs to happen before we can clear trees. So that has been a challenge in some cases, as has the weather, which we had hoped would get warmer yesterday. That didn't happen. And the icing has made it very challenging just to get to the sites and work on the trees, and even for our staff to get to our yard and get their equipment. Regardless, while less essential city services and city offices have been closed, our operations team and many others in the city have been working around the clock to resolve all the issues created by the weather, as well as stand up and staff warming shelters and other essential services for Portland residents. On the 16th, 2 days ago, before this latest round of ice, the forestry crews made really great progress on addressing those 405 cases. But then with the ice yesterday, had a major slowdown due to the road conditions and access. And what work we were able to do yesterday sometimes required a Bureau of Transportation escort to plow and sand for our staff to be able to get their equipment in there and work safely. So at this point, of those 405 confirmed cases, approximately 76 have not yet been assessed. That means that one of our people hasn't gone out to see what needs to be done so we can get the right equipment and people out to do the work. We expect more tree impacts and power outages and down power lines and blocked roads over the next few hours, and hope it'll warm up quickly. That said, there were only this morning 5 new cases added to the list, much slower than it was a few days ago. And I want to remind folks that the impacts are dramatic and sad. However, this is a very small portion of the at least 220,000 street trees, 1.2 million park trees, and the 2.9 million private property trees in Portland. And we're encouraging property owners to, as always, engage qualified and experienced arborists to assess and care for their trees to help avoid some of the impacts we're seeing on trees during the storm. I'm going to move on to my next item. I have 5 today. The 5th one is bulky. So my plan is to take a little break after the 4th one to see if y'all have any questions about the ones before, and then proceed time provided. So my next item for you is a urban forest plan update. The project continues and is moving along well and on track. We held the first Community Advisory Committee meeting on January 11th. That was held at the East Portland Community Center. And CAC, Community Advisory Committee members, learned about the project, the role of the CAC, and shared feedback on communication strategies and discussed the different benefits and services that trees provide. The Commission's representative for the project in the CAC, Commissioner McMillan, attended the meeting. Thank you, Commissioner McMillan. The team is continuing to host interviews with staff in different bureaus to talk about urban forest management challenges and opportunities, and these have been very useful so far. and will inform the recommendations selected for the final plan. Our staff on the project are also outlining topics to bring to you all, the commission, during meetings over the next 6 to 9 months. Moving on to my next item. Currently, there are openings for 3 positions on the City of Portland's Development Review Advisory Committee, affectionately known as DRAC. These are 3-year terms, and the DRAC is a volunteer advisory board to the city that's managed by BDS, so it has a similar function as the Forestry Commission. However, DRAC advises the city's development review bureaus. They seek to foster a timely, predictable, and accountable development review process. And they focus on implementation of the city's goals for transportation, land use, housing, economic development, neighborhood livability, and the environment. This is an opportunity for representatives of trees and development and housing to potentially be on the Development Review Advisory Committee on the DRAC. So that would be information to spread through your networks. Perhaps if you have space and desire to serve on multiple city advisory committees, you might want to apply for a DRAC membership. Applications are due on February 15th. And after my report, I'll put a link with information in the chat for you. My next item is an early notice save the date. The Urban Forestry Science and Policy team will be hosting a tree summit on the 2nd of March at Riegler Elementary School in their auditorium. This is a community event open to the public. All are invited. It's for sharing updates from the tree inventory project, which is ongoing again, as you know, increasing education and awareness around the importance of tree canopy, and connecting community members with urban forestry resources, and also sharing and promoting urban forestry and arboriculture related careers. The agenda is tentative, but it will include presentations by some speakers, including Ed Washington, who was chair of the Urban Forestry Commission while Title 11, the tree code, was being written. It'll also include tree walks around the Arboretum at Riegler School, and it will include lunch. So please stay tuned for further information at next month's Forestry Commission, and it'll also be in full detail in Tree Bark, our newsletter, which you all receive. I'll take a quick break there before I go into my final and meatier topic. Does anyone have any questions about anything thus far? Bruce.
Yeah.
I wondered on the tree emergencies. I've asked this before, but I'll ask it again. Is there any tracking done from the crews when they go out as to why the failures are occurring?
Thanks for the question, Bruce. There is tracking of all of the sites. It isn't as detailed because of the time factor. We don't do full inspections of what's there, but the crew often notice things and report back. Also, after the emergency has been addressed, most of these situations shift over to our tree inspection team. They go out and inspect, and they do those assessments about what needs to happen going forward and what the situation was before. And those are all documented in our database, the city's database. But we don't have a study running, and we don't have the capacity to have a study running really of the causes of failures across the city during an emergency.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So Commissioner Vandermark.
Well, Jen, my question is similar. And I'm just curious because I feel this deeply right now in my job, just messaging right now. Like, is there any just particular messaging you all are finding? Like, I deeply know that there's so many factors in place. And whenever I see the news and the tree coverage, like I start to clench in fear about the community response without the deeper knowledge. So I'm just curious to share with this group or others any helpful messaging right now.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Vandermark, because it gives me an opportunity to share on that. Yes, during events, there's a lot going on, and it's a lot of the same people doing those things. So I wish we had more capacity to focus on messaging. That said, we do try to. And what we're saying now is, as I mentioned in my first report item for you, these impacts, of course, are significant and dramatic and sad. They are a very small component of the entire forest. The vast majority of trees haven't been affected. And also, always, just like with a homeowner's furnace or roof, engaging qualified, experienced professionals to inspect and do maintenance on trees is what we always recommend. An ideal time to do that is before the stormy season starts. And that often can identify and address things that would be emergencies later and can be prevented.
Any other questions before Jen goes on to her big topic?
I want to point out, thank you, Brian. Brian just put a link in the chat to a really good article with good messaging from Oregon Department of Forestry. And it's similar message that I just gave you. So you can use some of that content perhaps when you are all asked about these things.
Okay, looks like Commissioner Nelson, another question?
Short one. One of the things I was thinking about this morning is if the city was indeed responsible for all maintenance of street trees. There's some liability questions when you get into storms, and I'm sure, I don't know, like I was asking myself, okay, the people who were electrocuted and killed, I don't know if it's a street tree or a yard tree, but it's the whole question of liability, because the city would be looked at as a big money source. So I'm just hoping that as we hopefully enter a new time period when the city does indeed have responsibility for street tree maintenance, hopefully those kinds of things are thought about carefully ahead of times to protect the city and also just be clear about it. So I'm just throwing that out.
Thank you, Commissioner Nelson. And yes, that is one of the many things that we'll be developing, in this case with the city attorney's office, as we create the city's first proactive street tree maintenance program. And I'll note that, as I think you all know, most cities in the US of Portland size or larger do maintain their own street trees. So clearly there are ways to do that are effective for everybody. Okay, I'll move on to my last item then. Could I do a time check? How much time do I have left?
You're doing well. I mean, we have till 10 for.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so my final item for you all is to provide some information on the city's single permitting authority project. It is abbreviated as SPA, so I may unintentionally refer to it as that while I'm talking. Next month, members of that project team will be attending the Urban Forestry Commission meeting, so in February. They will be presenting information, and there will be time to hear from you commissioners on the project to give advice. The Single Permitting Authority project was created by City Council resolution this past August. And in essence, it directs the city to put all permitting functions related to the development of private property and the associated public works permitting in one city entity. So public works permitting, in general terms, is development that's in the right-of-way on the city property that is related to that private property development. So this will be things like street tree protection and planting requirements, sidewalk requirements, curb cuts, water and sewer connections for the property, etc. So this is specific to development on private property, putting in a business or a home, and those right-of-way permitting processes for infrastructure. So as per City Council, this change from having the infrastructure bureaus issuing their own permits to having one single permitting authority issue the permits, that's all to be in place by July 2024. So in a few months. The project purpose is to have that one entity be accountable for all the private property development permitting in order to improve the private property development permitting business process so that customers can get permits in a reasonable time frame and with appropriate, predictable, and consistent reviews. Currently, all the infrastructure bureaus are accountable for the functions of their infrastructure systems. So they are the ones issuing the permits. For example, Bureau of Transportation issues the permits in these situations for sidewalk and street needs or impacts. Bureau of Environmental Services issues permits for the stormwater connection and pipe, wastewater pipe aspects of those projects, et cetera, et cetera. And Urban Forestry and Parks is responsible for the tree aspects of that. Also with BDS, so we share that work on site with BDS. The Bureau of Development Services, which leads implementation of Title 33, Planning and Zoning, is also one of the permit issuers in the current arrangement. So a recent step made in the project to develop this new single permitting authority is that all these private property development permitting functions from the infrastructure bureaus, including Parks, Urban Forestry, have been moved out of, or will be moved in July, out of those bureaus and into the Bureau of Development Services. Some changes are also planned for the Bureau of Development Services in this new single permitting authority role, and others are anticipated to be developed because the project, again, is to create this new entity in its midstream. How does this relate to trees? As you may have realized, it means that applying and enforcing the city's tree regulations in these situations will move from Parks, Urban Forestry to what is currently BDS and what will be the single permitting authority, specifically performing inspections of tree protection and tree planting requirements on the private property being developed, and for the related street trees in the right-of-way will move from Urban Forestry to Bureau of Development Services. This means also that the 4 current private property development tree inspector positions and the people in them will also move to the Bureau of Development Services, so they will no longer report to Urban Forestry. The fees collected by Urban Forestry to fund those positions and the services they implement also will move to the Bureau of Development Services. So the permitting fees that you all hear about each year the revenue from those associated with private property development will go over to the single permitting authority. There's been discussion of the city forester's authority in relation to the single permitting authority, as well as the city water, city sewer, and city street construction engineers authority, and whether that might be delegated to the single permitting authority for these cases. Parks and Recreation and Urban Forestry support the project. We're actively engaged in it, and we're hopeful that the single permitting authority will achieve its goals and help improve and expand Portland's urban forest. That said, Parks has communicated some questions and concerns about the potential for negative outcomes for the city's canopy goals and Portland's urban forestry infrastructure, given the changes. Specifically that the staff being moved to, and any future tree inspector staff still need to be part of management of the urban forest infrastructure in some way and connected with urban forestry, and must maintain the tree technical expertise required to fulfill the role. And that technical expertise also needs to be supported by other staff and resources. Parks has also expressed that urban forestry has been under-resourced and not able to fulfill all tree regulation obligations in these private property development and associated public works situations, but has been working towards doing so. And we've asked how these will be addressed going forward, particularly given that the Bureau of Development Services has just laid off over 60 staff. Finally, prior to the council directive, some Bureau of Development Services and urban forestry staff had been discussing moving the Bureau of Development Services tree code implementation role into urban forestry instead of BDS because of urban forestry's expertise and urban forest management infrastructure role. So how might that get addressed? The project team for the single permitting authority has acknowledged these questions and concerns, and the project is not complete but in progress and is on a very fast timeline. They have only 1 year to understand the current system, understand the challenges with the system, reorganize it, and implement the reorganization and have it result in improved outcomes. So that makes this very challenging to do, to say the least. So again, next month, the commission will receive more and more detailed information on the single permitting authority from the project staff. You all will have the opportunity to ask questions and provide input on the project, including writing a letter to the project and city council. We'll put a link to the project webpage in the chat, and I encourage you, if you have time, to explore it before the February meeting, so you have some preparation and information. That concludes my report. And if there are any other questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them.
Okay, I have a question. Oh, looks like Casey. Casey, why don't you go first?
Okay, sounds good. Can everybody hear me? Wonderful. Thanks very much, Jen. City Forester Cairo, excuse me. I am curious if there's any new implementations that are going to be put in, or else in terms of the single permitting authority. So I guess specifically, are they going to change any ways that things are being done right now, or is it just going to be all shifted to a different under a different umbrella? And I'm speaking specifically about two things in particular. One is getting every site surveyed professionally and having an arborist report for every development. If there's a tree on site, is there going to be an arborist report required as well?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Commissioner Clapp. That has not been discussed at this point in the project, and I recommend that that is a question you ask next month of the staff involved. Thank you. Great question.
And yeah, so my question was, so forest staff would be moving over, and you said the budget from permitting would be moving over. That budget from permitting, is that only for the staff, or is it above that, the loss?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Commissioner Feldstein. Brian, would you like to field that? Brian, one of his many hats is our financial guru.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So yeah, it will not just be the budget attached to those 4 positions. It will be the entirety of the fees we collect that are related to private property to development. So the revenue will actually exceed the cost of the positions that are moving. And part of that has to do with just the organizational structure proposed with SPA, and the fact that a lot of the development route that urban forestry was doing, those are the 4 positions who are fully dedicated to that function. There's a lot of other positions and other costs associated with it that are spread across the rest of the urban forestry permitting program. So that's why there's a bit of a mismatch between the revenue that's going versus the actual staff that are moving.
Yeah, that was sort of my understanding, that urban forestry was depending on that money for, quite a few things, but just how much excess revenue is moving over, don't have a sense of that.
Not an exact number right now. No, we're still kind of parsing a lot of that out. Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. Anyone else?
I see Commissioner Clapp's hand up again.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Clapp.
Cool. Thank you. Excuse me. So I have a second question for you, Jen. Commissioner, excuse me, City Forestry Cairo, is there a, in your opinion, and this also I would like to extend to Casey Jogerst, who's here as well. Do you, either of you, think that this transition is going to positively affect the priority that trees have in development right now? And for those of you who may not be familiar, all the other city bureaus that work the sewers and stormwater management and building codes, all these other different bureaus, there's not technically a hierarchy of what thing is prioritized, but there is functionally a priority, a hierarchy. So for instance, everybody is allowed a driveway on their site, and buildings are not always able to be shifted around because of different code requirements. So there becomes this kind of cascading effect of what, where does the buck stop? The tree is always the thing that gets to come out for this other piece of infrastructure, and it's not prioritized higher than other things. So I'm wondering if there is an ability, or if you guys think that this change is going to allow trees to be more shifted higher up in that priority level, so that maybe trees in development can be retained in lieu of, say, something else, or maybe the building will have more flexibility to be moved around, or driveway smaller, just anything else that you think would keep more larger trees or spaces for larger trees on site and in the right of way. Do you think this is going to have a positive impact ultimately, or do you think that it's just going to be business as usual, just under a different thing?
Mhm. Commissioner Clapp, another good question, and I want to commend your participation on the commission, because this is really good content to bring to the SPA team next month. In the meantime, yes, we have expressed this very need and concern to the project team and the project leader, who is city officer Michael Jordan. And our hope is that the project will improve that situation. And because there is one entity who has the final authority, that it's not down to the bureaus trying to represent their infrastructure, and there being kind of a competition or conflict between those things. And we have expressed that as well, that that is a goal we have for the single permitting authority project and the new entity, that trees shouldn't be the thing that goes first, and should be well represented, and space for trees as well as tree preservation elevated. That said, I see that Manager Jogerst is here. Casey, would you like to say anything?
I think you said it pretty well. I was just going to add that it is a concern of ours, and I'd say yet to be seen. But as Jen mentioned, I think bringing it up when you have the opportunities is really helpful. The more that they hear about those concerns from others that aren't necessarily those of us that they see on a day-to-day basis, it can be really helpful. I do think the intent is good. However, we need to see how that actually plays out. And so we need to keep it as, at the forefront of the conversation as they continue to move through this reorganization.
Thanks, Casey. And I'll close it out, and then we can move on to someone else. That's why I'm bringing this up with you now and giving you information, commissioners, at this time. This is the type of thing for which the Forestry Commission is intended. You are the one entity in the city that advises on things tree. There are many other advisory groups, but none of them focus on trees. And so your advice is needed, requested on this project. And I hope you take the opportunity next month. And beyond that, again, writing a letter, if you feel that that is appropriate, to City Council or the program staff as a result of that meeting, would be something to consider. Thanks.
I see Commissioner Nelson has his hand up. We're out of time on this topic. Is it a kind of less than 1 minute type of thing?
I just wondered, is this a sunset thing? I mean, are they going to try this out for a year? Or they think this is forever, or if this is just until a few city commissioners are no longer on the city commission and gets voted out.
There is no sunset included. It is intended to proceed going forward. It is happening at the same time as the government transition, where the structure is moving to a city manager, but we don't know how those will interface.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to the Budget Advisory Committee update. And I'm wondering who's going to be presenting that. Who's most up to date on that?
I gave Leah just minutes of a heads up on that. I should tell her
Okay.
sooner. So if she may not have something prepared, I apologize for that, Leah.
It's okay. I have my hands full a little bit, but and I also similarly, this was a harder meeting for me to be able to catch everything because we were all together. But basically the gist of it that I was catching was that there will be cuts for Portland Parks and Rec, and they talked about, like, a lot of the meeting was focused on looking at the data that they have around the services that are provided and where things have been improving and where things are not as good. So some of the improvements have been more people requesting and receiving financial assistance to be able to participate in parks programs. And then some of the challenges, I think we know, like the maintenance backlog is really large and has been increasing. And so that's one of the big declines that they've seen. There's also been increasing threats to park rangers and calls for service at the sites. And then I'm just looking back at my notes, the budget reduction is 5% that's being requested. So those were kind of the big pieces that I caught. The good news is there's 75% satisfaction with the Parks Bureau. So the public does see the parks really positively. And when they've been pitching the parks and fire levy, there's 62% support in their kind of the polling that they're doing right now. So anything, Forester, Cairo, please add anything because I know you were there too. Anything important that I missed from that?
I think that was an excellent summary, Commissioner Plack, and thank you again for participating in those meetings.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Right back on time. Okay. I was going to do a quick recap of there was a joint Parks Board and UFC meeting on natural resource service delivery. And I know that most of the commissioners were at it, so please fill in again if you have anything else you want to add to this. And it looks like we have about 15 minutes, so we could begin a discussion on this topic. The upshot is that there's been a directive because of a couple of city resolutions to create a kind of cross-bureau natural resources delivery work plan. And there were two city resolutions that relate to this. One, the first one was essentially BES, Portland Parks and Rec, the Water Bureau, PBOT, and Bureau of Planning Services were directed by a city resolution to establish a process that results in a work plan by the fall of 2023 that would include details and timelines for integrating services that relate to basically what is being called green and blue infrastructure. You know, it's a large list of things: nature, green infrastructure, watershed, natural areas, urban canopy, and other areas in need of alignment. And the directive on that was that, again, there would be a comprehensive work plan to get to this, but then also a new organizational and reporting structure that would reform and enhance central service delivery. Then on top of that, my understanding is that from starting in the spring of 23, the bureaus were working on this. And then the city resolution came up that placed that ordered a citywide operational natural area tree management to the service area with Parks and Rec, and also the Portland Children's Levy, as we have heard before. And then those two pieces of work are now sort of in a way unexpectedly integrated. The first part of the work that started last spring across bureaus had a consultant, and now again there's another outside consultant that's moving the whole full effort forward. So we don't have a lot of details at this point. It's pretty outliney, but there's been brainstorming that's been done to create sort of a blue sky vision of what a natural resource cross-bureau work plan could look like. And, you know, the idea is to strengthen and grow green and blue infrastructure, deliver healthy, clean, ecologically diverse system, provide world-class community service, and provide Portland with healthy natural resource delivery in this sort of overall blue sky, which is in very drafty form, I understand. They've come up with some preliminary types of measures, things like X% of tree canopy, of the city that is, you know, covered with tree canopy, X% of rain infiltrates, of where it falls, X% of all watersheds restored. And yeah, when queried about this, this is in quite draft form. This effort is being led by BES and Portland Parks and Rec. And the advisory bodies for it are all the advisory bodies for the key divisions. So for example, the Portland Utility Commission, Urban Forestry, Portland Parks and Rec Advisory Board. There's an inter-bureau team of directors and subject matter experts. And it's on a very aggressive in a very aggressive timeline where the first draft plan will be presented at a council work session, supposedly at the beginning of February, and the work plan actually delivered in May. So, you know, the deliverables of it would be kind of understand the resolutions that are out there already that affect natural resources. There would be a community engagement aspect to it. There would be a sort of a new organizational map, you know, and then there would be budget, HR, change management, that type of thing. So, you know, I consider this sort of a very drafty draft. There's in a way not much to say about it at this point, but wondered what else others heard and initial thoughts you might have on this. Any comments from the many commissioners who were at that river? Yes, Commissioner Jortner, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me? Hear me? Okay, great. You know, there was a lot of content discussed there, and yeah, I have some questions about funding and authority and compliance and all sorts of things that seem challenging. But the thing that really jumped out at me, I was thinking about later, was there's no public engagement in this process to speak of. And somebody from the community was visiting that meeting and spoke to that as well. And you know, just the 3 advisory boards are the public engagement process, is what I thought I heard Director Long say. And I'm concerned about that. I think that could you know, run us into a brick wall ultimately, or things could be missed, you know, that we didn't think of. It just feels really strange to have this rather large change in how the city will address its natural resources potentially without having any community engagement. The council work session, they'll have invited testimony, is my understanding, and that's, you know, and it wasn't really talked about. I know that there's a timeline issue, that's for sure, but wondering what other folks thought about that.
Looks like Commissioner Nelson has a hand up next.
Yeah, this this touches a bit on what Roberta was saying. It was interesting, the process at the meeting. We had been sent an agenda with a timeline on it, and some people, there were sort of Parks Board items for the first half hour or so, and then it was going to get into the discussion of this natural resource service delivery area. And so there were some people who came just for that. But as sometimes happens, early agenda items went much faster than, much quicker than was assumed, than was expected. And there were a number of people who had come purposely for the discussion on the natural resource area. The discussion, the presentations by Director Long and, I'm sorry, Uchimura, the director of BES, they were done, and we were into the asking questions. And so it kind of supported the idea that really public input is not valued that much, because here was a meeting set up where there had been several different entities asked to attend it for this discussion specifically on the natural resource area. And then because things went more smoothly in terms of the agenda, or quicker, we started about 15 minutes early on this one item. And the item that was the major reason these other groups were called. So I think it conveyed also that there really isn't a strong enough commitment to community engagement as exhibited by the action. Now, I don't know if that, I understand, you know, probably many of the city workers had been working all day already, and this was in the evening. So, you know, you want to get things done, but it's just the action says something different than the words. So I think that was kind of reinforced, or the questions that were asked later about community engagement. So I think it's a legitimate question.
Commissioner Vandermark.
Thanks. I feel like my comment is a little different, and just one thing I'm realizing from not just I would think parks perspective, but I mean, it's a fast moving train. I think that all of you are being brought onto, so I have a lot of understanding of that. But one thing I'm realizing is that even to provide community input on this, it feels like a very complex series of things that are being filtered in to inform these decisions. So just one perspective that I have is to even give thoughtful input on this issue, I just feel like there needs to be more information. I feel like when you're blending so many things that like have so many bureaucratic intricacies. So I don't know what that means or what resources you all even have as you're trying to work through what you're probably building the ship while sailing it. But that would just be a request, because these are the type of things that I think it's easy to give shallow input on because we don't understand the depth.
Commissioner Meisner, thank you.
Thank you. I kind of just echo what the previous commissioners have said. I was pretty underwhelmed by the meeting. It almost felt like just checking a box to say that there was a presentation to the different commissions and boards, because I don't know, there just wasn't enough information presented, I felt to like form an opinion or have questions to even know where to ask. So that's just what my feelings were on the meeting. Thank you.
Anyone else who was there who might want to comment? I know Commissioner Lilly was there. Let's see, Commissioner Bechtold, Commissioner Iannacho. Any other thoughts before we leave this topic?
The comments were covered for me. Thank you.
Okay, looks like Commissioner Jortner, another comment?
Yeah, I just want to, I guess, based on what we're hearing, maybe it's a question for City Forester Cairo. I'm concerned that the folks who are expressing their thoughts here, were, I agree, underwhelmed, and it did feel like checking a box. I think that's a good way to summarize that. And the community engagement. I feel like Director Long and Don Ujiyama ought to understand or get feedback to this effect. I think they said they were coming back to the commissions either jointly or separately they said, did they say March? And at that point, City Council will have already had their work session potentially. I don't know. I'm very confused as to how any feedback is being addressed or contemplated, or how accountability will be to the council that they've actually spoken to people. I know it's been going on for some months, but it just feels very confusing right now as to how the directors and the bureaus are trying to move through this in the context of a public process. So I'm wondering if Jen has anything to say about that or advice on that.
Commissioner Jortner, I was co-chair, Commissioner Jortner. I was also in that meeting and have been involved in the project, for lack of a better term, the directive from council. I think everything that has been said today was also said in that meeting. I believe that the takeaways for the bureau directors and the other folks working on the project directly are that there's an interest in a lot more information and community engagement. And it was discussed at length in the meeting that the agenda item started too early. And I don't think that was intentional by any means. Commissioner Nelson, we do what we can to cover the material as best we can in meetings. And a key factor, I think, to keep in mind is this is kind of like the single permitting authority that we earlier talked about, where council has set a timeline that, in the words of Chief Administrative Officer Michael Jordan to council, this is why I feel comfortable repeating it, is stupid fast. Having to present a work plan in early February is, right around the corner. That said, what I have heard directors Uchiyama and Long say, and in their materials, is that this is a process that will take a lot more time after that work plan presentation to council. What is being presented to council is only a work plan. It isn't an answer. It isn't an implementation. It is, here's the issue area and here's how we see it playing out. And I think we can expect to see in the plan what will be done about community information and engagement. So I think maybe thinking of it that way may be helpful. And I want to say too, I really appreciate all the commission's interest in discussion and that so many of you did make time to attend the extra meeting and participate.
Thank you. Great conversation on a really important topic and to be continued. And sounds like we need to be tracking this pretty closely and figure out ways to, make sure we have good ongoing input. I just want to say, Forester Cairo, I have had sort of similar thoughts where this is hearkening to, kind of the aligning the deck chairs, with the single permitting, where, sort of without understanding the nature of the problem and the opportunities, it's sort of first order to realign the deck chairs. And, from a quality perspective, it doesn't really make a lot of sense necessarily, but hopefully good will come out of it. Okay, I'm going to move us on to the next agenda item, which is we have Rick Faber for the code compliance program update for urban forestry.
Hello, hello. Hope you're all enjoying this weather event that we're all having. I do have some small children running around the other room, so if I get distracted, I do apologize. That's what's happening over there. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Rick Faber. I've been with Urban Forestry for a little over 10 years. I have been a tree inspector. I've been a volunteer, a community service aide, tree inspector, the permitting and regulation coordinator, and a little over a year ago, I was brought on as the code compliance supervisor to help build a code compliance group within the permitting and regulation arm of urban forestry. So I've got a little slide deck today to bring you through the process that we've been through, give you an update as to where that program stands today. And if I do start, I see the chat saying that the speakers are going out. If that seems like it's on my end, let me know. I can try switching over to a different Wi-Fi signal. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so I have control of the PowerPoint, and I'll just walk you through briefly what's going on in my world. If I did this correctly, it should start from the beginning. Okay, so hopefully you all can see that as a PowerPoint on the screen. All right, so permitting and regulation code compliance group. So I'm here to talk to you today about that. Just to begin with, there's a broad overview of what in the heck is permitting and regulation doing. And I've broken this down conceptually into two basic concepts with very similar steps, where rules exist via city charter, city code, administrative rules. And so we've got the permitting process where somebody comes and has an application. The city will review it, give approval or not. If they give approval, then the person is going to take some kind of action. And then ideally, the city will verify that action. Think about a building permit. Someone comes and says, I want to build a building. Here's my permit application, my plans. City reviews it, gives approval. Person builds the building. Inspectors go out and verify that that building has been built the way it was supposed to. Then on the flip side, there's the violation or emergency situation where something happens first. We're seeing a lot of this this weekend where something happens. And this past weekend, tree fell down. We'll go out, we'll review it, we'll have some kind of response. In many cases, an arborist crew is going to go out there and pick up the tree and get out of there right away. Then there's going to have to be some kind of action of the property owner. Oftentimes, we'll tell the property owner, hey, that tree fell down, you got to replace it. And then ideally, we would go out and we would verify it. So that's what permitting and regulation has been doing for a long time with urban forestry is that application, the review, approval, and some kind of action takes place. Now, as a coordinator, I spend a lot of time crunching numbers and pouring through the database that we use. And it's evident, and it's a little kept secret, that a lot of these permits that we're issuing, I've got on the screen the non-development removal replant permit, we're issuing the permits. We're saying you can cut a tree down, you have to plant a tree, but we're not verifying the planting. We have not been in the past verifying the planting. So, for example, cases with private tree planting requirements, upwards of 2,800 in 2020, 2,400 in 2021, 2,500 in 2022. All these were permits that were issued. Presumably, the trees were removed and hopefully the trees were replanted as required, but we did not verify that. And then for street trees, a similar situation where we have hundreds of cases being approved, trees being approved for removal, replanting being required, but verification not taking place. So this gap had been identified, and with the parks levy that was approved in 2020, the goal of urban forestry was to try to close that gap, try to actually verify those planting requirements. And we're going to do that by creating a code compliance group. So again, it's levy funded, and the intent is to provide oversight of these Title 11 regulations. Determined that not only were we going to ensure trees are planted when required, but we were also going to parse out the code compliance cases. So urban forestry has long had a policy where somebody calls in and says, hey, my neighbor's tree is dangerous, or hey, my neighbor cut down a tree, I don't think they had a permit. We will investigate and follow up and provide corrections, or require corrections and provide enforcement if necessary. So we decided to have all of that moved into the code compliance group. And so to go back to that, little chart that I showed you earlier with the permitting and violation, we're talking about, for the permitting side of things, that confirmation stage. So the current non-development work group is going to retain that application review, approval, and property owner would do some kind of action. They continue retaining that. And then the code compliance group would then take over the confirmation, going out there and actually making sure that the trees were planted as required. And then for customer service and logistical purposes, we move that entire violation and emergency follow-up, not what the arborists are doing, but the emergency follow-up communication, moving that into the code compliance group as well. Those violations had been handled by the non-development permitting group, but what we found was that the paid permits would then take a backseat to these violation calls, and so we had this conflict of interest as to who's going to get service first, the people that are calling in with a concern or the people that paid for an application. So we decided to have that entire violation concept move over to the code compliance group. So as I mentioned, I was brought on a little over a year ago, and much of this past year was program building. So I've been talking to all the different work groups within the city that do some kind of enforcement over BDS, BES, the Water Bureau, PBOT. I've reviewed all of the administrative rules for the different work groups in the different parts of the city. I've reviewed the codes. I've reviewed our documentation that we have, and the goal was to identify what work should be done, what's going to be high priority, what can be put off till later, what kind of staffing needs we had. So we were provided through the levy. I can have 6 people on my work group, including, and then I'm number 7. Who are they going to be? What classification should they be? Should they all be tree inspectors? Should they be something else? How much time are they going to spend on different tasks? So I did a deep dive into as much data as I could get a hold of through the Amanda 7 permitting database and through other workload tracking databases that the city has. And I did some recruitment. So along with myself, I was able to bring on Chris Ward and Roger Hedges as tree inspectors. Both of them have many years of experience. They were actually on the private sector running their own companies. I was able to bring them on around May as on a temporary fashion, and then was able to convert them to full-time in July when the funding became official. They have been helping out with those violation cases and emergency follow-up communications. Starting in July, I was able to begin recruitment for what I decided to be code specialists. So these are similar classifications as what BDS has for nuisance abatement and for other kinds of property compliance issues, property maintenance issues. So I'm using that classification, and I've been able to bring on Amanda Liston as a code specialist 3, Anna August as a code specialist 2, Autumn Blankenship code specialist 2, and John Garcia as a code specialist 2. The code specialist 2s are the ones that are going to be focusing on verifying the tree planting requirements. And Amanda Liston as the code specialist 3 is going to kind of bring the group together where she's doing a lot of the initial reviews and work assignment for emergency or for violations, and she's going to be assisting with a lot of the enforcement of the code compliance cases. And she's also assisting the Code Specialist 2 group with the workload management and processing their assigned tasks. So I've had a very busy year where I've been able to accomplish quite a bit. I've been able to scope the tasks. I did a full review of the policy. I reviewed the waiver policy that we have. I talked to all the different city groups, got those tree inspectors hires, got those code specialists hired. All of the non-development code compliance and emergency follow-up cases have been reassigned from the non-development team to the code compliance case, freeing up a lot of time for the non-development tree permit reviewers to focus on their tasks and provide good customer service for those paid permits. I've been able to put together a preliminary standard operating procedures for the code specialist group doing their non-development planting inspections. I had to work with BDS's technology training and continuous improvement team. That's the team that operates the Amanda 7 permitting database. So I was able to make some modifications in that. I was able to make some modifications to documents that are embedded within that system. And then I also had to work with the revenue division that manages liens and the lien database, because thanks to Nick and Brian, we were able to use liens in ways we haven't before. And so I had to get that database set up so that when we get there, we can begin using it in new and better ways to enforce tree code violation enforcement. And so the big thing that came out of this, with the onboarding of the code specialists in late November to early January, it takes a little while for people to get onboarded, we have begun the non-development planting inspections. So the way that works is when a non-development tree permit is issued, the permit holder has 365 days to remove the tree and to replant whatever they're required to replant, whether that's one tree on site, one tree in the road, or multiple trees, depending on the situation. Once that permit expires, we are flagged and we go out there and verify that the planting took place. So if the planting has taken place, we're able to give a thumbs up. We're able to provide some helpful information as far as how to ensure the longevity of the tree, and to, I'm just dropping dropping what we call that now, establishment, the proper establishment of the tree. And we're able to finally put UF tree permits into final status, as in we've gone out there and we've verified it. And while we obviously some are verified, but others we find that we can't find the trees. So we do provide communication to the property owners. We're letting them know that, hey, you were required to plant a tree. We looked and the tree wasn't there. Here's how you come into compliance. And we're keeping track of all of these. I plan on having a couple checkpoints every 3 or so months to see what those numbers look like. Right now, we're providing the helpful communication and the holding hands to help guide people to meeting their tree planting requirements. And depending on how that looks down the road, we can always ramp that up into stronger communications and other potential options for ensuring those trees are planted. Now, obviously, 3,000 plus permits a year is a lot of permits to try to have 3 people go out and double check and verify. So I've been able to create a self-certification process where people can go on using the tool Smartsheet that the city is leaning into hard right now. They can go on there and they can upload photos of their private property trees. So it's really easy to verify whether a street tree has been planted. You go out there, you're on the road, either it's there or not. But a lot of people have tall fences or hedges or large properties. You can't always tell if a tree was planted in the backyard. So we provided this option for providing us the photos of those trees that have been planted in the backyard. We have Amanda Liston as the code specialist 3 reviewing those and either approving them or saying that the photos weren't good enough. Can we come out there and verify that tree planting in person? So again, this is a brand new thing. It was known on the outset that getting 100% verification of all tree planting is unlikely to be done in person, because 3 people and almost 4,000 permits, that's going to be very challenging. Now, we will get 100% of these street tree planting requirements visited and inspected and the condition verified. And we're going to get as many as we can of the private property trees, and we're going to lean hard on this self-certification, self-reporting process. And as a new program, there will be lots of reflection and improvements made as we go. So some other things that I'll be working on in our varying states are improved enforcement. So currently, in a non-compliant situation where someone is called out, they removed a tree without a permit, they're supposed to plant some trees. If they don't do it, we have a process that we've had for a few years now where they get monthly enforcement penalties as a lien on their property. So those function as a late fee, and they get dinged every month until they come into compliance. Now that's worked fairly well. We get a lot of compliance out of that. We have a lot of people who had no intention of coming into compliance. Once they start getting that second letter or the third letter saying that this lien isn't going away or getting any smaller, they come into compliance, they plant their trees, and we're able to help replace the canopy that was lost through the illegal tree removal. But it's one tool, and I've been likening this to, I have a hammer, and it's pretty good at getting pieces of metal into a piece of wood. But some of my cases are nails and some of them are screws, and those screws aren't going in very well. And so I'm looking into having the Code Specialist 3, Amanda, work on figuring out the procurement services contract that the city has to actually plant the trees, specifically the street trees. So if somebody has a street tree that they're required to plant, they didn't plant the tree, currently, that can just be a revolving lien for years as that lien gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Whereas all that needs to happen is a tree needs to go in the ground. We're losing time of tree growth. Could have been planted 4 years ago, but here we just have a lien revolving. And so we're going to try to get those trees planted in the ground. I'm in the process of navigating the city procurement service contractors. I'm putting together a plan that will be reviewed by Jen in the future as far as actually making that happen. Hopefully we'll have a pilot ready for next planting season. Improved education and outreach. So I've been able to do a couple small things here and there on the website. We've been able to make some minor modifications to some of the A7 documents, but the biggest thing is just that we have people taking phone calls and reaching out to property owners. We do look to increase some communication at the local tree care providers. We want to update the permit language to really fine tune getting those trees planted, and the fact that we are in fact going to be looking at them now, which some people knew wasn't happening. So that should hopefully get greater compliance down the road. I've been working with Parks Outreach and the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion team to help navigate some of the ways to improve our communication, and made some good inroads there that have been challenging in the past. And then I'm gonna look back at the waivers that we currently provide, and we're trying to find additional ways to provide assistance to property owners in need. So currently our waivers are very limited to fees and penalties, where oftentimes we hear of property owners with lower income having challenging time removing large dead trees or taking care of dangerous conditions. And we want to find ways to help those in need. Haven't looked into it yet, so I don't know what answer we're going to come up with, but it's a thing that's on my plate, a conversation that I'm looking forward to having, because everybody at Permitting and Regulation knows this is a need, and we're going to try to find some way to help alleviate the burden. So that's me. That's what's been going on with permitting and regulation. I have had you guys off my screen, so I'm going to stop sharing, and I can reshare if necessary, but I want to be able to see your faces. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any questions, commissioners or others? Thank you. That was very informative. Okay, Commissioner Clapp.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks very much, Rick. It's very good to hear from you again.
Good to see you.
So I'm very excited that you guys are putting this together, but I have a few questions. The first is, are you guys doing proactive compliance? As in, are you going out and looking for things that are out of compliance, like say a tree that needs to be pruned or removed or something like that?
No. So the proactive compliance that we're doing is these tree planting inspections. So we're proactively verifying that trees required to be planted have been planted. We are continuing to have our the reactive or complaint-based compliance as far as potentially dangerous trees or trees removed without a permit. And a lot of that has to do with the limitations of our ability to police the neighborhood effectively. We still have a limited number of people, and driving along the same roads every day, going to the same basic locations, to be able to say that we're equally or equitably looking at all trees throughout the city isn't something we can do at this time, but we can respond to people when they have concerns.
Gotcha. Thank you. A follow-up question is if there's a some kind of statute of limitation for different cases. So, for instance, if well, actually, and this kind of goes along with development. It sounded like everything you were doing was non-development. So, I'm curious if there's any development or if there is a statute of limitations. So, if someone didn't plant a tree 5 years ago, are they still under your purview?
So we take those kind of considerations on a case-by-case basis. We do sometimes get calls about a tree that was removed multiple years ago. And we look at as much as we can for the case. Is it the same property owner? Has it changed hands a number of times? There's no limitation within code itself, but the limitation that we're placing upon ourselves is the reasonableness for the current property owner to have been aware of the requirement and to be responsible for non-compliance with it. So most of the time, that's not something that we have to take into consideration, but we do look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, perfect. And you're not doing anything in development right now?
Currently, things with development are on hold as we see how the single permitting authority plays out. So
Gotcha.
by having everything in non-development right now, it's very clear where me and my team stand, and the single permitting authority, we're going to wait until that shuffles out, and we'll go from there.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much.
Great. It looks like we have Commissioner Nelson followed by Commissioner Vandemark and Commissioner Chortner. Right.
I like the idea of having the online kind of self-reporting that we've indeed planted the tree. I wondered if there's any incentive, financial incentive that could be provided to property owners to use that tool. That way you would have, the more data you can get, I mean, it's just going to be able to back up what you're doing. And I think they're probably paying $100 to remove their tree, and then they're told you need to replant, and they say what they're going to plant with. Is there some kind of financial incentive that could be given to as a way? Because anyway, I'll just throw that out.
No, I appreciate that thought, and that's certainly something that has been tossed around and will be considered as we get into the waivers and assistance discussion.
Good. I think Commissioner Vandemark, you're next.
Yeah, thanks for this update, Rick. I know it is a lot of work, but I am excited. So I had two questions. One is, in the process of doing compliance checks, I'm very aware that it's not just whether a tree was planted, but the species. Like, what is kind of the plan if it's weeping willow, I'm just
Right.
et cetera. So like kind of wrong species, or it's half-inch DBH, like, so just how that's going to be handled as the first question. And then the second one is, and it sounds like it's still in process, but around assistance for folks. So if folks are out of compliance and the priority is getting the tree in the ground, like, I'm just curious, like, what will that mean in terms of that engagement with the resident? I'm assuming the city is just taking the cost in that situation, like saying, yeah, we'll do it, like not being like, hey, we're going to do this and bill you for it. Like I'm not, but yeah, what are the thinking around assistance, I
So the
guess?
first one is, yes, we're not just looking for anything in the ground. I have been training the code specialist team to look for, part of the using the code specialist was that they don't have to have deep arboricultural knowledge. So there is a gap there that we're training them up on. But trees should be tagged. Hopefully, that's part of the code. Is it should be tagged, and that was some of the updated language in the permits. But we are working on having them try to cross-reference the trees with what's on the permit and what's in the approved street tree planting lists. Sizes are on their radars. They all have calipers to go out there and measure with, looking for root barriers, making sure the tree's not too deep, making sure it's not being strangled. And currently, if they do find things, then we are not finaling the permit and we are sending a notice saying, this is out of compliance. You did not meet the requirement. This is how you meet the requirements. So if they planted a 1/4-inch willow whip, you need to remove the willow whip and plant the tree from this list as shown on the permit. The second question was that we don't know yet. We don't know what assistance is going to look like. It's very, very early. I have lots of ideas of what it could look like, but no proper discussions or decisions have been made as of yet. So I'm going to have to leave it at there. We could talk about it for a long time, but I don't think this is the right time or the place to do that.
Commissioner Jortner.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. This is really great and very gratifying. Personally, I'm excited that you're doing this, and it sounds like it's come a long way. Two things. Are you reaching out to the arborist community about this, your program evolution? Because, to the extent they're involved in assisting people to remove their trees, they kind of need to know, I think this is different than previous practice. And so to help them not tell property owners that forestry will never inspect, don't worry about it, gaming the system. So I wondered about your outreach to the arborists. And then the second question, I guess, follows up on Casey Clapp's question. I wasn't sure I understood. Are you saying there's no enforcement on development related forestry stuff right now? Like if somebody doesn't fence the root zone, or if they take out trees that were intended for preservation. And I know some BDS, there's different people maybe involved with that. I was just curious, what is happening in terms of compliance for development related sites, and what's being held off till the single permit authority is done? Because the development's still happening, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was the development question, and then the first question, sorry,
It was the arborists.
The arborists, yes. So
yeah.
the outreach to the arborists. We do fortunately have a local tree care provider workshop coming up, either later this month or early next month. And I have been engaging with the team that's going to be giving that presentation. I've made sure that this information is in there. So that's the primary outreach that we're doing in the moment. And there's always the potential of more to come. That's our primary way of engaging with the arborist community. So we're going to start there and then see where the gaps need to be filled in. As far as the development question, there's still compliance taking place through the development tree inspector team. So they have long-standing done the inspections for the tree preservation inspections for on-site preservation requirements. If somebody calls up during a development process and says, hey, something's going weird or sideways, or those trees should have been there, they are still responding, and they are still working through the development permits for compliance. If something happens during a development that falls outside of development, yes, that's still coming to me. That's being done. What's not being done yet is a good job of verifying street trees are being planted when required. So that's something that could absolutely fall within the wheelhouse of my team, but the single permitting authority is putting a hold on that while the development conversation takes place. So that's one of the gaps that I didn't flash up there today. But one of the gaps is we're not doing a good job verifying the planting, and that's on hold. But we are still, if somebody calls up and says, hey, there's a development that just closed out, the tree's now planted, absolutely, that's coming to my team. We're looking at that, but we haven't built in the proactive inspections as yet.
So are you saying that the single permit authority, what's being under discussion is potentially whether they'll do enforcement as part of their function or not?
The single permitting authority is taking up a lot of oxygen in the room for development discussions. This would be a new process in development. It would probably need new permitting or new programming in the A7 permitting database. And there's just no room to have those discussions right now while this fast speed single permitting authority project is underway. So once that is finished, we can go back and revisit that conversation.
I'm going to join in to connect some dots on our earlier conversation about the single permitting authority. So you may recall I mentioned that we have not been able to fully implement the tree code on private property development and the associated public works. This is one of those areas, and we have communicated that to the single permitting authority team. And one of our goals is, as I said before, is to see improvements for the city's forest out of the single permitting authority project. So our request to them or questions to them is, how will they staff this need that has existed before? And in effect, they're inheriting this need, which is really driven by capacity. So when those staff come and present next month, Commissioner Jortner, this would be a really good discussion for them to have with you all.
Thank you, Jen.
Great, thank you. I see Commissioner Clapp has a question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, Rick, if you guys have done any work towards outreach about the tree itself. So I know you did say that you're working with that group, but you have the information of what the tree is, the size at when it should be planted, that kind of thing. And so I'm curious if there's any follow-up that you're hoping to do in regards of kind of giving some information, some education, kind of some tree stuff to these different permittees or whoever has these permits, basically to say, hey, you've had a tree, you cut down a tree, you've had a tree planted for a year now. Here are some things to expect, and just kind of use the resource that is the I don't know, this database of people. And use the education and outreach program for their kind of stated purpose, which is educate and outreach to these people to say, hey, if you keep your tree for 5 more years, this is how big it's going to get. This is all the things that it's going to be doing for you, and kind of use this as an opportunity to kind of pull them into the tree person fold, rather than just being an instrument of getting people into compliance, not to reduce what you're doing. I do think it's fantastic, but it's always nice to bring people in kind of with that more positive messaging. So are you guys hoping to do anything like that, or partner with local groups like Friends of Trees or Verde or something like that to try to bring them into that kind of tree positive community?
We haven't gotten there yet. What we are doing is we're providing establishment information. So when we go out and we verify a tree's been planted, the permit holder, that's how I like to say it, the permit holder will get a letter saying, thanks for planting the tree. Here's how you establish it. Make sure it's healthy and safe. Additional information, I think that it's a good idea that I'll definitely be looking into. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. Glad to hear it. Thank you.
And I'll add to that. Gosh, we could have talked about community education around trees and information many times in today's meeting and many previous meetings. And Rick mentioned our community stewardship team in urban forestry. So I want to clarify that they are very focused on partnerships and community engagement around events such as tree walks and planting. And we have identified some time ago in urban forestry that we really would like more capacity to do general communication around the services of trees, proper tree care, how to get assistance, the fact that one may need permits to do tree work. We have not had capacity to do that. So that's something that we as a division and I as the division manager have been identifying with the Bureau, and we aspire to get resources to build that capacity in. Like today with the storm and what we were talking about, and Commissioner Vandermark asked, how are we talking about it? Boy, there's so many opportunities in the conditions today to help folks out with that information. And we don't have full capacity to do that yet. So we're looking for it. Thank you.
I have a couple of quick questions. One was, well, first of all, Rick, this is very impressive work and a, really kind of short timeline. And also, very exciting for the public to know that we mean business. And I think that, it's going to help the canopy for sure. I'm wondering if you have any measures yet of sort of percent of the different types of situations where compliance inspection has been done, and then sort of any goals where you hope to get to over what time period. And then my second question was actually to probably both you and Jen, and that was, when we were talking about the single permitting authority and that there's a potential for improving the tree canopy through it, I'd love to hear one single example of either, from the compliance end or otherwise, some scenario where they help us understand how that could happen.
Wow, I'm bad at two questions. I'm sorry. The first question had to do with
Oh, yeah, percent of your
percent.
different
Yes, okay.
categories. Yeah,
My
yeah.
apologies.
And what you hope for
Yeah.
over what time period. Yeah.
So what we do have is in 2013 and in 2016, there were point in time studies done. Angie DeSalvo led those. I actually did a lot of the bean counting for the 2013 one. And so we have some benchmark percentages of compliance. I don't have those off the top of my head. I took those and I put them up on a shelf. And I'll be looking to compare those in a couple months, as the months progress. It's too early to get any sense of what the current code specialists are finding because they just started. December was the training month. This month is already iced out, so we're going to see what kind of numbers we get from this. But in a couple months' time, I should be able to start crunching data and pulling some interesting numbers and comparing those to the 2013 and 2016 reports that were put together.
That's good. I was thinking of two aspects of it. So there's what percent of permits are observed for compliance, and then what percent have complied.
Right.
So
yeah, and I'll definitely be able to get those two numbers. Absolutely. And then the second question, Jen, do you have hopes for the single permitting authority that you can clarify?
Yes,
I
and
remember the question.
I'll invite Manager Jogers to jump in when I'm done if she would like. No, not required. What's happening, Commissioner Feldstein, is we have expressed our hopes and desires for the project for single permitting authority to improve canopy, trying to seize that opportunity, which is happening regardless. And you had asked, like, what would an illustration be? So an illustration might be that right now, as you all are familiar with, given the current structure, the City Foresters Authority is equal to the City Traffic Engineers Authority, is equal to the City Wastewater Engineers Authority. And sometimes those policies created by those different groups conflict. You all are familiar with the new 10-foot rule that the Water Bureau put in place, for example, about not allowing for tree planting. One could hope that if there is a single permitting authority who has the ultimate responsibility, that process and policy and goals can be established for that person to implement, where those things no longer are in conflict, that all of those infrastructure systems are in agreement about what the priorities are, and that trees are a high priority, and we are able to increase tree retention and tree space for planting in rights of way. Let's see how that goes.
thank you. Looks like one final, we're sort of out of time for this topic, but Commissioner Vandermark.
Yeah, and I actually more have a comment than a question. And I just wanted to share around compliance. Like I've been on the commission, I think, almost 6 years. And just sharing like this isn't, in my mind at least, the need for this is not about reprimanding community members, nor do I think that's the intent. It is like if you look at the report, it is because we're trying to build our urban forestry canopy, and a lot of people are not planting trees, and it's resulting in honestly thousands of trees not being planted. So, you know, the regulations are helpful, but if we can't ensure that they're in fact getting the trees in the ground. So I think it's a both and strategy around community engagement, but we're also trying to ensure that that follow-up happens so the trees get in the ground. So I just want to say it's not like people aren't planting trees. It's like we need people to like plant trees. It's part of approving them to remove them. So it's more nuance, not just heavy regulation, but like let's plant trees.
Thank you for that. And that is absolutely the training message I'm sending to my team. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. This was a great discussion, great presentation. We're going to move on to an update on PSEF funding from City Forester Cairo.
Great. Okay, thank you all for your discussion of the past item. Thank you, Rick, very much for all your great work on this. Having Rick's experience with urban forestry and as an arborist and urban forester has been essential to that project. So shifting gears, I'm going to give some more information about the PSEF funding, new funding that's coming forward. I can't see you all when I'm doing this because I need to refer to notes. So just keep that in mind. Feel free to, actually, I think given time, if possible, let me get through this part and then we can come back for questions. Okay, so we all know in this room, I think, that Portland's current policy of assigning maintenance responsibility for street trees to the adjacent property owner has for a long time been a real burden to property owners and a barrier to equitable preservation and expansion of the urban forest. And that Portland is unique among peer cities in this regard. Most cities of our size or larger in the United States, the city has responsibility for street tree maintenance. Street trees are city property. It's well known that this policy leads to inequitable outcomes and is a primary reason property owners in Portland do not plant street trees. We know this from our own 2018 Growing a More Equitable Forest. That is the city's first ever tree planting strategy, which involved a lot of community engagement and input. And we were told quite clearly that this is a main reason people don't want a street tree, even if it's free. Efforts to change this policy go back decades. Most recently, in 2018, City Council approved one-time funding to develop cost estimates for the city to assume responsibility for and proactively maintain the city's estimated 220,000 street trees. And so with that funding, Urban Forestry worked with the Davy Resource Group, consultant employed by us, on the report of how to do this and what it might cost and scenarios for costing. And that was completed in 2020. During the same period, at the direction of then Commissioner Nick Fish, Portland Parks and Recreation undertook an effort to identify permanent funding solutions for the Bureau's operational and capital maintenance needs. This explicitly included trying to identify a permanent funding solution for street tree maintenance to be assumed by the city. That project, which you have all heard a lot about, is known as Sustainable Future. And that effort led to the voter-approved 5-year parks levy and the potential future $600 million general obligation bond for capital maintenance, which Deputy Director Todd Lofgren briefed you on last month. For various reasons, including lack of public support in polling and the likely ineligibility of general obligation bonds, neither of those have emerged as viable funding sources for street tree maintenance program development and implementation. Fortunately, we also have in Portland the voter-approved Portland Clean Energy Fund. Parks leadership has not wavered from its commitment to identifying funding for street tree maintenance and has been in frequent communication with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability and PSEF program, which is housed in the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability over the last several years. And we have been conveying the strong alignment between PSEF's funding priorities and tree preservation and care with them. As you heard last month, Commissioner Rubio has now proposed allocating $100 million to the preservation and care of Portland's tree canopy over the next 5 years. This $100 million proposal includes investing in the city providing maintenance of street trees, including pruning, removal, and replacement, and all aspects of the full life cycle of a street tree's care. It also includes additional programmatic investments to help prioritize proper tree care and preservation of our existing urban forest. And the initial 5-year budget for these investments is still under development. At this point, it is mostly an announcement and an intention from Commissioner Rubio's office. So we're in early days. Here's some details about street tree maintenance program and tree preservation. What's in our proposal, what is in the Davey report, and what we will be implementing with these funds, should they be successful, is 5 to 10 year inspection cycle for the street trees. There's an estimated 240 to 260,000 street trees. This is a different number than you heard before, 220,000. This is because our inventory right now is showing that there are more street trees than our previous numbers. So we've tried to account for the trees that are there now. Urban forestry staff team are will be developing and implementing the program. So when we say the city will provide street tree maintenance, that responsibility will fall to urban forestry. And obviously this is a brand new program service to residents that's never existed before. And so we will be creating a whole new program to provide that service. And some of the components as well in what will happen is that the private tree care providers will be doing the majority of the pruning, removal, planting, and establishment, so that life cycle care of street trees. They'll be contracted with urban forestry being responsible for managing the contract-based program. This is a very typical way in other cities for street tree maintenance to occur. So next steps for this. The PSEF committee, which is advisory to the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability about the use of PSEF funds and those policies, they will review Commissioner Rubio's proposal for the $100 million over 5 years at their next meeting. That meeting is on the 25th of January. You may have heard a different date before, it's been moved. So the 25th of January. And there will be an additional follow-up meeting after that where the committee is expected to formally vote on the funding proposals, including this $100 million for tree preservation and care. And this is a step that needs to be taken before PSEF allocations can go before City Council to hopefully obtain final approval. Okay. Questions, discussion? Thank you, Brian, for preparing the talking points. With the storm, it's been a little busy, so I'm very grateful.
Commissioner Clapp.
Thank you. Thanks for this. This is really good news. I'm really happy to hear that there's at least some movement on this. I know it's been something we've talked about for a long time. So could you I have 3 questions. First, 100 million over 5 years. For PSEF funds, that's not a whole lot, isn't it? There's a lot left. Isn't the PSEF like over 5 years much larger than that?
Yes. The number I heard most recently, which was probably 4 months ago, and so a little bit outdated, was $540 million.
Just right now or over 5 years?
Brian, do you know the answer to that? I don't know.
Yeah, that 540 million, which is what Commissioner Rubio's announcement allocated, is the amount over 5 years that exceeds what they were expecting. So that
Okay,
is
so
just
that's
the additional that they weren't planning on with their existing climate investment plan.
excellent. All right. Well, I'm glad we're
That's
getting
that's
some
where
of that.
that number comes from. So you're right, that 100 million for tree care and preservation is a fraction of the total PSEF funding available, but most of it is already allocated to other things.
Awesome. Thank you. So my second question is two things. One, will the city actually I have two extra questions. Jen, our commission city forester Cairo will how will the city prioritize what tree work? And I know this is very early, but this is putting you on the spot because you I believe have already covered this with the Davy report. But this kind of goes it talks about prioritization. So how will the city prioritize and what will it be prioritizing? And I'm thinking a la the replacement of ADA sidewalks. I have no idea how the city PBOT has like decided which places, which walks, which spots, which parts of cities are prioritized and which are not. I'm sure they have. I shouldn't say I'm sure. I hope they have. So I hope that urban forestry can do that. So I'm curious how. And the second thing is in terms of replacing trees that once they're taken, will the city or will the urban forestry department have any outreach and work with property owners to decide what the best tree for them will be? Because yes, it is a city tree, but of course it's in front of their property. They may not be required to maintain it, but it will have an impact. So I'm curious about those two things.
Thank you, Commissioner Clapp. At best, I can say right now, yes, we have intentions for those things. Duly noted. We're still at the point of figuring out with PSEF, like what's in and what's out. And of course, we need council approval before we can really proceed. So you all are aware, maybe I should have said this earlier. One of our first steps when the funding is approved by city council is that we will need to bring on staff who will be developing the program. And these are among the many things that they will have to dig into and figure out. And you all will be involved in that as the advisory group to the City on Trees, as will the PSEF work group, which I'll speak to in a little bit as well.
Cool. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
Commissioner Vandermark.
Well, and my question is just about being supportive of this moving forward. Jen, I like the use of the word when, because I really want to believe in that. And from what I am hearing more broadly, it seems like there's a right assortment of things to get this approved. But is there something that as a commission that we can at least do to vocalize our support? Because this, like when I saw this article, my brain exploded in enthusiasm for something that we've been trying so hard for to see it. It's like they heard us. So yeah, how might we be as a commission supportive of this?
Yes. First off, back to that favorite tool of advisory bodies in the city, y'all can write a letter thanking, requesting. I think the primary need for that will be with city council. And there is time on that because Brian, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think our expectation is the earliest this would come to council would be maybe in February. And we also, it's early days. So what this agenda item will look like in front of council hasn't really been discussed yet with the PSEF team. But we might anticipate opportunity for public comment or invited testimony. And of course, there's nothing stopping from the commission or individual commissioners from right now letting city council know how important this is to y'all, if that's true, signing up for testimony. So this is a discussion I would encourage you all to have.
Commissioner Turner.
Yeah, I had the same question as Commissioner Vandermark. And I guess the follow-up would be, does the PSEF committee need any support or from the commission at this time? What, is this, might there be a potential for them to say, we don't think this should be the priority, this should be focusing on something else? And so I'm wondering if hearing some support from the commission to either to the PSEF staff, you know, Sam Barazzo, or to the PSEF committee. I don't know if there's a chair, you know, and if there's any messaging, you know, that they, what might they be grappling with that we can, or would it be more just of a general, appreciate you know, taking this up, and how much the city needs this, the basic rationale reiterated. What's your sense of that?
Yep. So I don't think the PSEF staff or BPS need any encouragement or support. Our perception is that they are well on board. We don't know much information about the committee and that meeting. If I think to be most certain, it could be a good thing for the commission to communicate with that committee and or attend the meeting, which is public, to offer comments. That might be something you all want to discuss and decide and vote on what your next steps might be. Do you want a representative to be at that meeting? Or who will draft a letter, that sort of thing. It is soon. It is the 25th, so drafting a letter is probably going to be difficult. I will also share that the PSEF team has said their focus is more on city council. So that is what we know. Brian, would you add anything to that? I know you've been in touch more recently.
No, I don't think so. I think focusing on city council, if the commission wanted to ask someone to draft a statement in support to city council, you could get that started now. But yeah, I think that's probably the best focus at the moment.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, and the process then would be for you all to figure out who's going to do that and vote on it, if that's what you want to do.
Shall we have the policy committee start working on that at our next meeting? And because are you saying that the council might hear this or be briefed on it before the next UFC meeting, and we would need to be authorized to have someone draft a statement for council?
I think
in
it's
advance of
unlikely
that?
to be before our next UFC meeting. There's going to be some process on this. There'll be at least 2 PSEP committee meetings before it goes to city council. So it's sounding like it would be March at the earliest at city council. So I think we have plenty of time if we wanted to ask someone to draft something and then bring a draft for review to our meeting next month.
Okay.
And
Do we have a proposal to do that? Oh, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'll do mine later. Thank you.
Oh, I was just gonna make sure that we had a clear action. Did I hear the proposal that we ask our policy committee to draft a letter to city council? The other thing that was thrown out was having an attendee to the PSEF meetings. Maybe Brian, you actually attend those? Or no?
I don't typically.
Okay. So we don't really have a representative there for these next 2 meetings.
That's correct.
But I heard you
staff
saying,
go ahead.
oh, I heard you saying that you didn't think that was any kind of risk, that it wasn't necessary for us to have someone there.
I think, you know, the committee does accept written and public comments. So if the commission wanted to either ask someone to submit something ahead of the meeting on the 25th, I think that'd be entirely appropriate as advisory to the city, with PSEP committee being included in that.
Okay, does everyone have a specific motion on this?
I think Bruce Nelson had his hand up.
Okay.
Where are you, Bruce? There you are.
I mean, I'll go to the meeting. I was going to go anyway on the 25th. So I'm happy to just make a simple statement. The UFC is very supportive of the PSEF efforts to fund street tree maintenance, or, just something very simple like that. If that's all right.
That sounds great. Yeah, I make a motion to have Commissioner Nelson represent us at the PSEF meetings to make sure that a strong message is conveyed. Do I have a second for that motion? Okay, is that Commissioner Meisner seconding?
Yes, I second.
Okay, oh, thank you. All in favor?
Adrian, I'm sorry, can I
Yes.
ask just a quick question? Are we
Sure.
wanting to do separate motions? Because I think there was also the proposal to have the policy committee write a letter. So we can do it as separate things. I didn't know if we wanted to do it as one thing.
One would be great.
Okay.
Do you want, yes, so then it would be Commissioner Nelson representing us at PSAF and directing the policy committee to write a letter to City Council. Sound good? Okay.
Commissioner
So,
Phelps?
go ahead.
Yeah, some information for y'all I would ask you to consider. So the way it has been requested and articulated is it's about tree protection and care.
Okay.
And that includes street tree maintenance program, as well as an arborist trainee program and anything else that we can include. So for your consideration, perhaps the language would be supporting the $100 million proposed amount for tree protection and care, including launching the city's first street tree maintenance program, removing that barrier and burden from property owners.
And are the best bullets on that from the press release, or do you have an internal sort of set of bullets that can be used for Commissioner Nelson and for the letter? I mean, we pretty much got it, but we
Yeah.
don't want to say it in the wrong way.
Right. Let me look at this. How
Okay,
about this?
Well, you look at that. Why don't we just go with this motion? Yeah, so the motion now is for both items that we discussed. And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor? Okay, looks like we've got support for both those things. Excellent. Okay, and City Forester, let's make sure we get the content right.
Yeah. So I put part in the chat. I'm going to add to it.
And one thing I'll add just to clarify what will be on the agenda at the PSF meeting on the 25th. They'll be considering, if you click on the link that I added to Commissioner Rubio's announcement, the funding investments are broken up into two sets, set 1 and set 2. That meeting on the 25th of the PSF committee will be considering the first set with also the $100 million for tree preservation and care. So that's with the idea sort of being that those are the ones that are more fully developed and ready to move forward, and that the remaining ones in set 2, they're taking a little bit more time on. So just for the heads up of what PSF will be talking about on the 25th.
Right, anything else on this? I see Commissioner Nelson, is that an old hand or?
Yes, if you look at the PSEF site right now, they're trying to form a community advisory committee that's going to assist them in developing the criteria that relate to how this $100 million potentially could be used. There's a lot of details in there that are interesting reading, and I don't remember the date when they want applications by, but it looks like they want a community group that's going to help them develop the guidelines that will, I think, if I understand them right, then those, if they're adopted, would be the ones that urban forestry is operating within, or it's part of their instruction. It seems like we're getting more and more players in the instruction game or something like that. I don't know. It's a different, it seems like a different way. So urban forestry is going to have So it's PSEF money. So PSEF has some say over, they're giving urban forestry, this is how we want it used, and this is what our committee says. And then urban forestry is, okay, we've got these guidelines, and then they figure out exactly how they do it. So it is interesting.
Okay, let's see. I have City Forester Cairo and then Commissioner Jortner.
Yes, hopefully in this meeting, Commissioner Nelson and others will have the opportunity to talk more about the PSEF Advisory Group, the Equitable Tree Canopy Work Group. There is a seat for a Forestry Commissioner on it, and there's a connection there. Maybe Commissioner Feldstein, you want to proceed with the current discussion, then we can move to that later.
Okay. Anything else on this topic? Let's see. Looks like your hand is down, Commissioner Jortner. Is it?
Yeah, that's Jen
Okay.
covered what I was thinking.
Oh, okay, excellent. All right. So so it sounds like in the remaining 2 minutes, you want to bring up the question of whether or not we have a representative from UFC on PSEF. Yes, City Forester Cairo.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm sorry, I should have done this differently when we started this agenda
problem.
item. I've been holding this for after
Oh.
decisions about commission participation. However, an Urban Forestry Commission representative to the PSEF Trees Work Group, currently called the Equitable Tree Canopy Work Group, is requested, and we'll put the link in the chat if it's not in there already. And Commissioner Nelson's correct. There's a lot of information on that site, and a seat for the commission to be represented is called out. That group will advise PSEF on equitable tree canopies. So the planting and community planting and education work that's already happening, as well as the street tree maintenance program. And you can look in that link. There's a lot of information about what they're looking for. My perspective, looking at all the other representations that they will have on the committee, is that perhaps for y'all's consideration in choosing a representative, what I'm not seeing in the other seats is kind of two areas. A commissioner from the Urban Forestry Commissioner who has knowledge of tree maintenance needs and practices beyond young tree establishment and care. Those are different things. And also just the second of the two, the role of the commission as advising on city policies affecting trees. So having that broader perspective. And also, please know that you all have time to vote on who that member might be at the next meeting if it's not to happen this meeting. But selecting who will attend and what they'll say is, I think, would be the priority for this meeting, given the timing of that PSEF meeting.
Okay, so we're out of time, and I'm cognizant that we have an appeals hearing right at 11:30. Or
We do not. That's been moved to
oh,
next
it's been next month. Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's continue for a couple of minutes more if folks agree. Do we have any folks on in the meeting who would like to be our representative on the PSEF tree committee? Okay, Commissioner Jortner, you had a question, or?
Yeah, well, I was just to clarify, it might be good if everybody could read the information about the committee first and what they're looking for and like the skill sets they are after and kind of what Jen was trying to extrapolate for us, and think about, whether you're interested, and
Sure.
And then we can sort of hone in on it at the next meeting. I think it would be fair and appropriate to do that.
Sounds perfect. Okay, well, we hope everyone will take a good look at that and think about whether the commitment will work. It for them, and it will be important. And Commissioner Inacho.
Acho. But my question's for City Forester Cairo. Could you send along kind of those considerations that you expressed here, so that when we're looking at the link for this commission, we kind of have that in mind?
Sure, I can put those in the chat.
That would be great. Yeah.
And they're only for your consideration. It's up to you. And they'll be in the notes, but I'll do that. Well, actually, I'll do it by email because I think we're done with our meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Excellent, everyone. Thanks for a good meeting, and we'll see you all next month.
Thank you all.
Be safe, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye. Be
Yes.
safe.